There's a piece of paper sitting in a county records office right now, older than your grandparents', that could legally let you build a house on a strip of land 12 feet wide. A strip most cities today would laugh you out of the permit office for even asking about. It is called a legal nonconforming lot, and it is the reason a New Orleans shotgun house can still get built brand new in 2026 on a lot so narrow that if you try to plat that same lot from scratch today in almost any city in America, it would be flatly illegal. I'm going to show you exactly how this works, which cities still allow it, which cities already slammed the door shut, and what it actually costs to build one of these narrow homes in 2026. Stick around, because the ending of this video is the part that will either save you a fortune or stop you from making a very expensive mistake, and I'm not telling you which one until we get there. Before we get into it, hit subscribe and tap that bell. I put out honest, no-fluff research on affordable and alternative housing every single week. No sponsors, no affiliate links, just real numbers. If narrow lot buildings or tiny homes are on your radar, you want to be here. Let's start with the house itself, because the dimensions are the whole story. The shotgun house showed up in Louisiana in the early 1800s, brought over through West African and Haitian building traditions. The classic version is no more than about 12 feet wide, with rooms lined up one behind the other, front door to back door, no hallway. Legend says you could fire a shotgun through the front door, and the blast would exit clean out the back without hitting a wall. That's where the name comes from. Most shotguns run 12 to 20 feet wide and stretch anywhere from 40 to 80 feet deep. Some go even narrower. That skinny footprint wasn't an aesthetic choice. It was a survival strategy. Developers in the 1800s were packing these homes on a lots a third or a quarter the size of standard lot, which meant more houses, more rent, and more sales per block. And here is the part that matters for us today. Those lots were platted and recorded before modern zoning ever existed, which means in a lot of cities, they are still on the books, exactly as narrow as they were 150 years ago. Now, compare that to what you're allowed to build on today in most of the country. According to the National Zoning Atlas, over half of all single-family zone land in America requires a lot of at least 40,000 square feet just to legally build a house. That's what they call a builder's acre. Only about 3% of single-family zone land allows small lots under 10,000 square feet. Look at individual cities, and the width requirements get just as strict. In New Orleans itself, the same city that invented the shotgun house, suburban lots today often need to exceed 50 feet of width. In Portland, anything under 32 feet wide gets a special designation as a narrow lot with extra restrictions on garages and setbacks. In New York City's lower density districts, you need 2 side yards of at least 5 to 8 feet each on top of your buildable width. So if you walked into a planning office today and said, "I'd like to plat a brand new 12-foot wide residential lot," in a vast majority of American cities, the answer is no. Full stop. Doesn't matter how clever your floor plan is. Here's where it gets interesting. Zoning law has a principle baked into it that goes back to basic due process. A city cannot pass a new rule and retroactively make something illegal that was completely legal when it was created. That protection has a name: legal nonconforming status. Most people just call it grandfathering. If a lot was legally platted and recorded before your city's current minimum lot width and area rules took effect, and it hasn't been resurveyed, split, or merged since, that lot typically keeps the right to be built on under the old rules. Not the new ones, the old ones. This is not some gray area internet theory. It's black-letter zoning law in most states. Legal counsel groups describe it plainly. If your lot was legally created and recorded before the current zoning ordinance took effect, it likely qualifies as grandfathered, and in most jurisdictions you can still build a single-family home on it or maintain an existing structure without needing a variance. So picture a block in a historic district full of original 12 to 16-foot wide shotgun lots, platted in 1890. The city's modern code might demand 40 or 50 feet of width for any new lot. But those individual 1890 parcels, if they've stayed intact on the record since before the current code, are frequently still legally buildable at their original, narrow, shotgun-era dimensions. That is the loophole. You're not asking the city for permission to build a narrow. You are using a lot that was already narrow before the rule that would have stopped you ever existed. This isn't hypothetical. Builders are doing it right now. In New Orleans, Build Now NOLA builds a home called the Napoleon, which the company describes as a modern version of the traditional New Orleans shotgun, designed specifically to work on the city's classic narrow footprints. Architects in Houston, Nashville, and Austin have picked up the same proportions for accessory dwelling units and small lot infill, specifically because a shotgun's narrow width, typically under 16 feet, fits lots that are too small for a conventional floor plan. There's also a nonprofit angle worth knowing. After Hurricane Katrina, a design-build firm called Miletus Group developed a modular shotgun system built off-site and craned into place on New Orleans' historic narrow lots, fully code-compliant and built to FEMA standards, specifically to refill the city's original shotgun width parcels without fighting the modern code. This tells you the loophole isn't a fringe idea. It's an active, functioning niche in real estate and construction, right now, in 2026. Now, before you go hunting county records for a forgotten 12-foot lot, I need to slow down and give you the honest version, because this is where most videos on this topic stop, and it's exactly where you need to keep listening. Grandfathered status is not automatic, and it is not permanent. First, the burden of proof is on you. You typically need to show old plans, historic aerial photos, or utility records proving the lot existed as its own legal parcel before the current code took effect. If the paperwork doesn't hold up, the city can treat it as a modern, non-buildable fragment instead of a protected legal lot. Second, and this is the part almost nobody talks about, cities can and do close this loophole. Seattle is the textbook example. For decades, small lots created before 1957, some barely a fraction of a modern minimum, were grandfathered in specifically so owners could develop them within a reasonable window. But when the city council discovered developers using that exact grandfather provision to build oversized houses on tiny, forgotten parcels, they closed it. The loophole that had stood for over 50 years was shut down in a single council session. Third, most non-conforming lot protections come with limits on top of the width exception. You can typically build a house, but you still might be locked into the era's original setback rules, and any real expansion later usually has to meet current code, not the old one. A lot of jurisdictions also strip the grandfathered status if the property sits vacant for a set period, commonly 24 months or more, or if the lot ever gets merged or resurveyed. Miss that window, lose the right permanently. So the loophole is real, it is documented, and builders are actively using it. But it is fragile, it is jurisdiction specific, and the moment a city notices a pattern of people exploiting it, they tend to write a new ordinance and close it fast. Let's talk about real numbers, because this only matters if the math works. National new construction in 2026 is running broadly between $150 and $350 per square foot, depending on region and finish level. NAB puts the national average bill for a standard-sized home, around 2,600 square feet, at roughly $428,000, before land is even factored in. On the West Coast, you're closer to $215 to $280 per square foot. In the Midwest and parts of the South, you can find builders starting closer to $150 per square foot. Narrow footprint construction changes that math in a specific way. A shotgun-style home isn't cheap because it's small in square footage. Some of these run 600 to 1,200 total square feet. It's cheap because the footprint is efficient. You're not paying for a sprawling foundation or a complicated roofline. Historically, shotgun-style new construction has been estimated around $100 to $110 per square foot, though with 2026 material and labor costs, a realistic modern build with contemporary finishes lands closer to $180 to $250 per square foot once you account for today's lumber, code compliance, and trade labor pricing. Worth noting that per square foot number actually runs a little higher than standard home, not lower, because HVAC and utility hookups don't shrink just because the footprint does. You're still cramming full mechanical systems into a tighter site. The savings show up in the total price tag, not the rate. The land side is where this loophole actually pays off. NAB puts the average finished lot in America at $91,146 in 2026. Urban infill land in an established neighborhood runs roughly $75,000 to $150,000 per acre. But a legal non-conforming shotgun lot is a fraction of a normal lot size, often a tenth of an acre or less, which means the land cost per parcel can come in dramatically below that average, sometimes low five figures in older, unrestored historic neighborhoods. Run the full picture on an 800 to 1,000 square foot narrow lot build in a mid-cost market, and you're frequently looking at a completed project somewhere in the $140,000 to $240,000 range, land included, in markets where conventional 2,000 square foot home on a standard lot would run $400,000 or more once land and site work are added in. That's the entire appeal. Same city, same neighborhood, a fraction of the entry cost, because the lot itself sidesteps the modern minimum. So if this has your attention, here is the real process, not a shortcut. Start at your county or city planning department and pull the zoning code section on non-conforming lots, sometimes labeled legal non-conforming, sometimes grandfathered lots, sometimes substandard lots. Every jurisdiction phrases it differently, so search all three terms. Next, request the plat history for the specific parcel. You are trying to establish the exact date that the lot was legally created and recorded and confirm it hasn't been split, merged, or resurveyed since. County GIS and assessors' offices usually have Historiplat maps you can pull for free or for a small records fee. Then check whether your city has an active or expired variance program specific to narrow or small lots. Some cities, instead of relying purely on grandfather protections, have written formal narrow lot provisions in a current code, Portland's narrow lot standards being one clear example, which can actually give you more design certainty than relying on a decades-old grandfather clause alone. Finally, talk to a local land use attorney or your planning department directly before you buy. A $500 consultation before closing is a lot cheaper than discovering after closing that your lot's grandfathered status lapsed because it sat vacant for 3 years before you bought it. Now here's the reveal I told you to stick around for. The narrow lot loophole is not a permanent hack. It is a closing window. Every single city that has ever discovered developers systematically using grandfathered narrow lots has responded the same way Seattle did. They study the pattern, and then they close it, sometimes in a matter of months. Which means the honest way to think about this loophole is not as a strategy you can rely on for the next 20 years. It's a strategy that works right now, in specific cities, on specific parcels, for people willing to do the paperwork and move before the rule changes. The historic shotgun lots that still qualify today are a finite, shrinking inventory. Every year, more of them get bought, built on, resurveyed, or merged into neighboring parcels and lose their grandfathered status permanently. If narrow lot building is something you're seriously considering, the window to use this loophole is open right now. It will not stay open forever, and in some cities it may already be narrower than it was 5 years ago. If this kind of research, real zoning law, real 2026 numbers, no sponsors telling me what to say, is useful to you, subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. And drop a comment telling me which city you want me to dig into next, because non-conforming lot rules are different everywhere, and I want to make sure I'm covering the places you actually care about. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.